Office of the Leader of the Opposition press conference for November 8th, 2022. Today, I'll introduce my panel from my right, as I usually do. To my right is none other than Mr. Sherwin Holder, Member of Parliament. To his right is Mr. Ganesh Maipal, Member of Parliament. To his right is the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Aubrey C. Norton, Member of Parliament. And to his right is Mr. Ronsil Ford, Senior Counsel and Member of Parliament. And to his right is Mr. Marvin Williams. Thank you for joining us today. Today's press statement will be read in two parts, and the first part of today's statement will be read by the Leader of the Opposition.
The 2022 preliminary voters list denies electors information on their assigned constituencies. In August 2022, the Ghana Election Commission published the preliminary list of electors for the next local government election. The certificates of commissioners signed by Commissioner of Registration Vishnu Prasad state that the list of persons on the list are those qualified as electors, and I quote, for election to the National Assembly and Regional Democratic Councils, unquote. Not surprisingly, therefore, the list does not assign electors to their local government constituencies for local government elections. The PLE assigns electors only to divisions with no information on constituencies. In local government elections, residency is vital to several aspects of the process. With regards to eligibility of voters, the law requires electors to be registered and living in the constituency in which they are desirous of voting to be able to vote under both the PR and the constituency components of the election. In this regard, one arrives at the conclusion that the Elections Commission is either incompetent or is preparing for general and regional elections rather than local government elections. GCOM needs to state which elections they are preparing for, and if it is local government, they need to rectify the problem in keeping with the law. As regards candidates and nomination, the law, for example, stipulates that a candidate seeking elections under the first past the post or constituency component of the local government election must be registered and living in the constituency in which he or she is seeking to be elected as a councillor. Furthermore, the law requires lists of candidates to be supported by no less than 100 and not more than 110 registered voters residing in the specific municipality or constituency to be contested. Clearly, GCOM must ensure that electors are easily determined to which constituency they or other electors belong. GCOM is also obligated to ensure that contesting parties and groups can readily determine to which constituencies electors, candidates, and nominees belong. The 2018 official list of electors for local government election provides such information. There's a copy here, and it gives specific. It states the name of the person, the address, occupation, ID number, and it is done on a constituency basis. This is available. For the next local government election, GCOM has completely failed in this regard. Failure to rectify the problem places an undue burden on electors, and worse, will deny most of them the information they need to make claims and objections and to vote. GCOM must discharge its obligation to provide the voter with the knowledge and requisite information needed to effectively and meaningfully participate in local government election. While we have not made a decision on participation, we are concerned that the law and established protocols are not being followed. The 2022 preliminary list of electors is manifestly unfit for local government purposes. It is not only bloated, but it also violates the constitutional rights of electors. It undermines the integrity of the election. It is a recipe for disaster. GCOM must get its act together. We therefore will be requesting an urgent meeting with GCOM to raise these fundamental questions.
Thank you. The other half of the press statement will now be read by Mr. Ganesh Michael.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning to members of the media and to our audience. Teixeira's arguments against the opposition motion on a clean voters list are ridiculous. At yesterday's sitting of the National Assembly, the Speaker's denial of the opposition's motion of adjournment to debate a matter of definite, urgent, and public importance did not surprise anyone. Guyanese are fully aware of the puppet master relationship between the Speaker and Freedom House. No one, therefore, expected the Speaker to rule objectively on the merits of the motion and in the interest of parliamentary democracy. However, the opposition tabled the motion to ensure it cannot be accused of not exhausting all available conventional mechanisms to get a clean voters list. At GCOM, the efforts of our commissioners to appeal to reason and good sense have been resisted by a chairperson who has shown no courage, no competence, and no independence in fulfilling her constitutional duty to the people of Guyana. APNU-AFC itself has been making its case for a clean list to the wider society, the diplomatic community, and civil society. Additionally, months ago, we publicly and clearly signaled our readiness to support all required constitutional and statutory amendments to facilitate the cleansing of the list and the use of modern voting technologies. All these efforts have failed to convince the PPP to return to its 2015 position when Freedom House itself loudly called for fresh house-to-house election, house-to-house registration, and for the use of biometrics at the place of polling. PPP's hypocrisy is there for all to see. Minister Teixeira's arguments on Monday against our motion were just as ridiculous. She argued that the fact that the list of electors now includes over 90% of Guyana's total population is a result of the opposition using a 10-year-old low national census figure. But whether the population is 750,000 or her predicted 800,000, the fact still remains that the PLE has over 200,000 names of persons who are either dead or no longer reside in Guyana and is therefore bloated. The number does not disappear or dwindle based on the size of the population. It still remains a number that could be exploited to deny the democratic will of the people through massive voter impersonation, as occurred in the 2020 elections. Minister Teixeira also repeated the ignorance that the same database was used by APNU-AFC in 2011 and 2015. But as has been frequently explained in rebuttal, the list today in 2022 is not the same list in the 2011 and 2015 elections. Recall that the last house-to-house registration was in 2008. The National Register of Registrants was therefore 3 years old in 2011 and 7 years old in 2015. Therefore, it is 14 years old today. It has lost its purity, shape, and soul. It is not the same animal. Further, Minister Teixeira, in justifying the recent criticisms leveled at her, stated that the opposition leader, Mr. Aubrey Norton, violated parliamentary rules by tabling a motion for the cleansing of the voters list by constitutional and statutory amendments when such amendments to electoral laws were slated to be debated the same day. Minister Teixeira either lacks understanding or believes that Guyanese people can be easily fooled. The opposition's motion for a clean voters list targets a few specific articles in the Constitution. The motion, therefore, cannot be accommodated by the bogus Roper consultations, as these consultations, according to the Attorney General Anil Nandalal, on several occasions have nothing to do with restructuring the electoral provisions in the Guyana Constitution, but are limited to the Representation of the People Act, ROPA, and the National Registration Act. Likewise, the argument that the motion should await the larger CRC process is dishonest. Elections are due in 2023. The motion targets only a few specific constitutional clauses to increase the integrity of and public confidence in those very elections, which are likely to be held before the CRC even starts. Lastly, as regards the accusations that there is no evidence of voter impersonation, let us quote Kaichor News on the 10th of September, which stated that, and I quote, more than 100 overseas Guyanese fingered in opposition fraud list voted at 2020 polls, unquote. The Kaichor News article supported its own conclusion by stating, and I quote, this is according to information seen by this publication following the release of documents pertaining to voter fraud, unquote. At the end of the day, the PPP is hell-bent on taking Guyana into local and national elections with a bloated list. The PPP is being short-sighted and reckless. We have exhausted all avenues of reason and good sense. This arrogant attitude of the PPP is manifest in their unwillingness to have an investigation into the allegations of bribery and corruption leveled against Jagdeo by Sue in the Vice News report and the violation of the rights of Ms. Tamika Clark by Soku. The PPP attitude is swarming with potential for exacerbating the tensions in Guyana. I thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I will open the floor for questions on the press statement.
Good morning, everyone. I see Mr.
Okay,
Ford there on the statement.
but I have no.
No, sorry? Can you hear me? Good morning, everyone. I see Mr. Ford there
Good morning.
on the statement. No, sorry?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now, the comrade leader was talking about what he called the bloated voters list. And Mr. Mahipal said that they've tried just about everything. My question is, where do you go from here? The bloated voters list. And Mr. Mahipal said that they've tried just about everything. My question is, where do you go from here?
Redirect the question.
Yeah. You don't want to.
Well, there are two options. political action or check to see what is the legal option?
And when you talk about political action, what's the likely political action?
All right. I see the hand of Miss Tamika Garnett.
And when you talk about political action, what's the likely political action?
I didn't hear that.
What is the likely political action?
Well, we have already begun to be involved in picketing exercise, and we continue to keep this under review to determine what actions we will take going forward. I'm not hearing.
We seem to be having a delayed sound. Mr. Adam Harris, are you hearing me clearly? Tamika Garnett is speaking.
Huh? Tamika, get the questions.
Miss Tamika Garnett, I see your hand.
Hi, guys. Hello?
One moment, please.
Hello?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Miss Garnett, are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you clearly now. You can go ahead.
All right, good. Pertaining to the statement, I wanted to ask a question on Mr. Mahipal's number of 200,000. He said that the list contains, I think, 200,000 either dead voters or voters who are not in the country. Firstly, can you say what evidence the PNCR has of this? And secondly, if you have evidence of this, why was it not raised during the claims and objection period that GCOM recently had?
There is no sound coming from the opposition leader.
the end of the hearing, it doesn't necessarily follow that the person would be taken off. For instance, we know of a case where in Riverton, somebody went and said, "This is my house. I am alone living here." It doesn't necessarily follow that here. And we object. They then said to the person, they had to prove, they had to find the person who claimed to be there to prove that the person exists. So the claims and objection is not a proper mechanism to clean the voters list. And the fact that in 2008, the then PPP government accepted that it wasn't a proper mean and proceeded with a house to house. And then again in 2015, when the PPP lost, they called for a clean voters list, claiming that claims and objection cannot clean the list. And so that is what is the reality. Claims and objection cannot clean an extremely bloated list.
Mr. Opposition Leader, you would have to repeat your answer because 90% of it was off. We had no audio coming from you.
Ms. Garnett?
Yes.
You would have to repeat your answer because
someone said 90% of it was lost.
whoever's controlling this audio is doing a poor job
That person.
because
All right, could you just give us a second? I'm just asking that our media personnel bear with us for just a few seconds. It seems that we're having some technical issues with the sound. Thank you so much for your patience. I hope you're hearing us a bit better now.
Uh,
Can you hear us?
I must apologize on my part. It's something is definitely wrong.
Hello? Can you hear
Yes,
us?
I'm hearing you.
right, and my request, could the opposition leader repeat the last answer he gave? I think the question was asked, was
Yes.
it by Ms.
Yes,
Garnett?
I'm hearing you.
Right, and my request, could the opposition leader repeat the last answer he gave?
What, this is the question of
The 200.
the 200. What I said is that this information was provided to the police, but it was given to GCOM, and GCOM did began the process of confirming, and many of them were confirmed. Also, the GRO was given the numbers of persons who were dead, and many of them were confirmed. And so that process stopped, I think, when GCOM stopped sending the information to the police and GRO, though they were given it by us. The second thing is, I pointed out that by the nature of claims and objection, it is very difficult to remove 250,000, much less 200,000 people by claims and objection. The process demands a hearing, people come, make their case, etc. And so, like the PPP did in 2015, they demanded a clean voters list through house-to-house registration and the use of biometrics. And we're saying the same thing at present, that claims and objection cannot clean a voters list, and we need to have house-to-house registration and biometrics at the place of poll. So that is a critical issue. And mind you, this is not a list that is a year old or 2 years old that only has a small number of people. This is a list that is 14 years old. And every year, people are dying, people are migrating. I pointed out yesterday in the parliament that just in 5 years of migration statistics from US Homeland Security, 54,000 Guyanese obtained permanent residence. The same document suggests that more than 200,000 got visitors visa. And the same document contends that 25% of the people who got visitors visas don't return. And so the figures are high, and claims and objection cannot do it. It has to be done by house-to-house registration or a mechanism for new registration so that the people that are in Guyana and available to register can do so.
Thank you.
Can you hear me properly? I can go ahead with a follow-up.
Yes, Ms. Garnett.
Okay. Now,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, yes, you can
Mr.
go ahead.
Norton just said, okay. I understand the section where Mr. Norton is saying the need to get dead people off the voters list. But Mr. Norton is also talking about migrated people, which are people who are still alive and are not in Guyana. He also mentioned visitors visa, people who are on visitors visa. What is Mr. Norton's thoughts on the ruling by the Chief Justice. Can we have a clear understanding? Because the ruling was, even if we have house-to-house registration and they go to a house and the person is not there and the person is not dead, and you could correct me if I'm understanding it wrong, is that that person's name cannot be removed from the list. So let's say I am on a visitor's visa. I am in the US, house registration is going on, and you go to my house, I am not there. The High Court's ruling is you cannot take my name off the registration from the National Register of Registrants. So is Mr. Norton at the same time saying that in contradiction of this ruling, people who are not in the country should be removed from the list? Can you start by saying, giving a clear understanding of your thoughts and your position on the High Court ruling, your understanding of it and your position on it, and then say if you're still saying that persons who are not in Guyana, not living in Guyana, or not in Guyana doing a house-to-house should be removed from the list. I think I'm not understanding that properly.
But if I manage to decipher anything from it, I think you need to note that we have long said that we acknowledge the High Court ruling, but in 1990, we came together, developed legislation to extend the election in 1990 and clean the list. What we're saying at this stage is that we are prepared to work with the government to amend the legislation to ensure that we can clean a voters list. And we've said that on many occasions. Yeah.
Further to what the leader said just now, the leader of the opposition said, I believe that we have to contextualize what is the position of the party, because I believe your question needs to be answered from the point of view of understanding what is currently happening at GCOM and what the past year revealed. It's our position that the Guyana Elections Commission has an obligation to produce and to present for the public's consideration an electoral list that is credible. Once an electoral list has been produced and we have demonstrated the fact that the last electoral list was not a credible list, we have proven this over and over again by the recount, by the information that came out of the recount, by the confirmation of information by the Registrar General of Boards and Debts, and by the Commissioner of the Police, or you want to refer to him as the Chief Immigration Officer. So it's not no longer a question of whether we are capable of proving or will have established first that persons who were not resident in the country or the time of March 2nd elections voted, or that persons who would have died were recorded as having voted. Our press statement today pointed out clearly that we highlighted the need for the issue of biometrics. The issue of biometrics will deal with the question of voter impersonation. It will put in place a mechanism and technology that will detect voter impersonation. And the leader this morning, I believe, was at pains to point out clearly the importance of voter impersonation in a way in which it could skew and affect an election, the misuse of voter information, and that the best way around the world, and has been acknowledged to be, is the introduction of biometric information and technology. And we find it very surprising that up to now, the Guyana Elections Commission seems to be taking a very partisan position, a position that is against the grain, against common sense, and a position that supports the position of the PPP, that there should be no introduction of biometrics. Biometrics is what is going to deal with the issue of voter impersonation. It's going to deal with the fact that the Guyana Elections Commission must produce an electoral list that is credible, or put in place mechanisms and technology that will reduce the risk of voter impersonation. So in summary, we maintain that the list is bloated. We maintain that persons who would have died were recorded as voted, and we maintain that there were great amounts of voter impersonation, all of which would have been recorded. Thank you very much.
I'm following up because I feel like if my question wasn't totally answered, I'm asking about the question of residency, and if, as it is right now, there has been no change to the constitution to say residency is or should be a requirement in house-to-house registration. And let's not forget that even if a change is to be made to the constitution, the APNU FC would need 2/3 of parliament to get an agreement on that. I'm asking, in the state of things as is, with the constitution as it is, and the High Court ruling as it is the opposition leader still lobbying for persons who are not in the country to be removed from the list, or they're asking GCOM to remove persons from the list in contravention of the High Court ruling? We have an elections that's coming up next year. That's on March 13th. We have to look at what is it's at the state of things as it is now. I understand that you are talking about things that are projecting into the future, but I'm talking about the state of things as it is now and what the opposition leader is saying now about removing persons from the list, even if they're not in the country. He's stating statistics from the US on persons that have migrated. And I'm saying, as it is right now, the High Court ruling is that even if persons are not present in the country, you can't remove them from the list. But the opposition leader is still pushing that he wants persons who are not in the country. They're still alive, they're not dead. So this is not the issue of getting dead persons off the list. The getting persons, whether they've migrated or if on a visitor's visa even. So they're still Guyanese, they still live in Ghana, they're on a visitor's visa, which can extend as much as 6 months. Is he saying that these persons should be removed from the list?
Madam, I have consistently said we need a clean voters list. You seem to be imputing to me things that I didn't say. Could I say to you again, credible elections demand a credible voters list. GCOM is obligated to give us a credible voters list. That question you have raised, we have answered before. We are prepared to go to Parliament with the PPP and make the changes. That will ensure 2/3. I think Roysdale also wants to come in.
Ms. Garnett, one of the areas which the question don't seem to cover is that you seem to place great reliance on the decision of the Chief Justice in relation to the issue of residency. And if we were even supposed to concede that you were right in your interpretation of the decision, the press conference today deals largely with the issue of the local government elections and the context in which the role the list plays. The question of residency, unlike the issue in relation to a national and general election, is a critical element of a requirement of a voter to be able to exercise their franchise to vote. So the proposition that you're relying on the judgment of the Chief Justice to deal with the issue of voter impersonation or a bloated list in the context of local government elections, where it is a specific requirement that a person be resident in a district, a local authority area, or in a municipality, whatever you want to call it. It is completely two different issues. So whatever the Chief Justice would have ruled on the issue of residency, it is completely irrelevant in the face of specific statutory legislation requiring as a condition that a person be resident in a district or in a local authority area or a constituency, if you want to describe it as that. So we're talking about two completely different things. And I believe that your reliance on the decision to deal with the local government issue of residency in relation to the local government issue is misplaced. Now, in the context of what we said today, in terms of the importance of the list and what the leader and my friend, Mr. Ganesh Mahipal, Member of Parliament, would have dealt with, they're pointing out that the list as produced by GCOM failed to satisfy the issues in relation to the constituency element. And we are saying also it fails to deal with the issue of residence, because the GCOM has not produced a list in accordance with the law. It has not produced a list that even purports to deal with the obligations of persons being resident in a local authority area. I hope that I have, together with the leader, we've been able to answer your concerns clearly. Thank you very much.
And I want to point out that we quoted what the CEO put out. He said, for election to the National Assembly and regional democratic councils, which means he would have put out a list for local government elections. He should have put out a list for local government election rather than a list for regional and general election, which is what he would have put out.
Mr. Adam Harris, I see your hand.
Yes, I would like to ask a question outside of the thing. If not, I'll wait until you so indicate.
They can indicate. If not, Mr. Adam Harris, you can go ahead.
From the lady, you were in Mocha over the weekend.
Miss Tamika Garnett.
Oh, sorry. Who has the floor, me or Tamika?
Go ahead, Mr. Harris. I was after you. I raised my hand after.
All right. Who has the floor, me or Tamika?
I'm assuming that she raised her hand to. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Adam Harris.
Now, from the lady, you were in Mocha over the weekend. And you made some observations, and then there were problems with allegations of party people attacking reporters doing a recording of the thing. I saw an answer from Ms. Flubes which said that was utter nonsense. What is prompting all this hostility or negativity in the face of your party going out to public forums?
Well, I was there. I don't know about the hostilities people are talking about. What I said when it was raised with me is that it is being live streamed, and therefore I don't see any reason why somebody can't video it, because once it was being live streamed, all and sundry would see it and could share it or not share it. So I don't understand how this whole issue emerged, I observed that there were attempts to link it to other issues, but that is people's prerogative. But it was live stream, and in my opinion, it was public, and therefore nobody should be stopped from recording it. It was an open forum. In my opinion, it was public.
Is Tamika going on, or?
If you want to ask a follow-up, you could go ahead.
You want to go, Tamika?
Oh, I was waiting to see if you were finished with that issue because I
Yes.
wanted to ask a follow-up about that issue.
No, you go ahead. It's all right.
Okay, you guys can hear me? I'm getting a feedback kind of. Yeah. Mr. Norton, there seems to be, well, the GPA put out a statement in addition on the issue and accused you of being evasive and abrasive with media persons. And there seems to be a pattern, or person seems to be of the perception that there is a pattern with yourself and party members as pertains to the media. Is the PNCR or the APNU at all concerned about its media relations and public relations? And is anything being done to perhaps address it and perhaps work out better relationships?
All I would say to you is that we have been engaging the press. The press has been freely asking questions, sometimes repeating the same questions, and we would have accommodated them. So whatever conclusion is arrived at surely was not arrived at based on what happens in terms of engagement. When I compare with other press conferences, we are asked far more questions. We give more direct answers. We have been clear with what we are saying. But you know, you can't stop people from developing their perception, especially when it has a political element to it. But I think we have been forthcoming. We have been answering questions. We have had press conferences in which questions lasted more than an hour, and some in which it lasts 10 minutes. And so we
Action coming from the APNU AFC when we were in government. And perhaps what we should aim to do is to get a media fraternity that can operate independent of political directives. Thank you.
Were you able to hear what Mr. Mike Paul had said? No.
Just the end of it. Just the end. I don't know how long he was speaking for, But the video was frozen when the leader was talking. Perhaps Mr. Mahipal could repeat. And apparently there is still this long delay between question and you hearing.